you all for joining us today. For those who don't know me, I'm Daniel Glyn-Jones from Odgers Berndtson. I lead the digital governance capability for the technology practice, which sits at the intersection of data privacy, forensics, and cybersecurity. It's my absolute privilege to work with such an outstanding expert panel to explore the question of generative AI, friend or foe. And lastly, we'll hand on to Ray, who's also going to lead in with some opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Daniel. So my name is Ray Eitel-Porter. I'm with Accenture, a large global technology consulting firm where I've been leading responsible AI or AI ethics, and really have two hats in that respect. Look after work that we do with our clients, helping them to implement responsible AI, setting up what it takes to make sure that wherever they're using AI, it's done in a safe and responsible way. And then the other thing that I've done over the last 3 years is to design and implement Accenture's own internal AI compliance program. So learned a lot from doing that, which I can also translate into the client environment. So just a few opening comments that Daniel asked me to make. I suppose the first question is, well, why has generative AI made such an impact? What changed? Because obviously generative AI itself had been around for a while, and traditional AI been around for much longer. But I think we hit the tipping point in terms of both capability and accessibility with ChatGPT. All of a sudden, people could use a simple tool that really blew many people away in terms of its ability to help. And it was very simple, easy to use, and very accessible. It's also important to recognize, though, that generative AI is fundamentally different from what we might call traditional AI. So traditional AI is very good at spotting patterns in large amounts of data. It can be used for demand forecasting, for recommending products based on similar people who've bought things like you, for looking for characteristics of people who are likely to repay a loan, and so on. But generative AI, as its name generative suggests, actually creates. It creates new text, it creates new images, it creates new voice. And the foundation models that we see in use have this sort of inherent capability to create new content. And when you ask ChatGPT or Bard or one of the other models to do something, that's what it's drawing on, that inherent ability to create. This gives it immense capability, but also it comes with risks. On the capability side, I'm sure you've seen exam results that ChatGPT and others are able to complete. And great realistic images from Midjourney and people like that. And one of my favorite examples recently, as we saw multimodal generative AI, that's where you can combine pictures and text, was somebody who asked it to help them to understand how to lower their bicycle seat. And they uploaded a photograph of their bicycle seat, and it identified the right nut that needed to be loosened. And then they uploaded a photograph of a toolkit, and it identified the right type of spanner and the right size of spanner that would be the thing to use to actually lower the bike seat. It's a pretty trivial example, but you can start to see the power of this type of technology if you imagine how that could be extended. With this power, though, come certain risks. You've all read, I'm sure, about inaccuracies. There are concerns around bias in the training data, toxic language, potential privacy infringement. There are questions around copyright and IP. And then we have the broader sort of societal risks in terms of impact on the workforce, disinformation at scale, turbocharging fraud, and so on, and cybersecurity risks, which I'm sure we'll touch on. And the challenge is that because companies that are building applications don't have access to the underlying foundation model itself or the training data, to do so in a way that is safe and secure, you have to build safety layers on top of the foundation model within the application that you're actually developing yourself. So it's a different type of approach. And another technique is to constrain the model to only draw upon defined data sets that you supply, rather than drawing on its inherent training data, when it's answering questions. It's a little bit like those comprehension tests that I certainly didn't like doing at school, where they gave you a text and you had to answer questions about the text, and you were only supposed to use in the answer information you gained from that one piece of text. That's a good way of constraining a large language model. Copyright and IP is a bit of a tricky area because the courts are still out on exactly what will be admissible as fair usage in that domain. And Microsoft took a bold step recently by offering to indemnify people against copyright infringement claims. I think that shows how much they were concerned that nervousness in this space was holding people back. What is interesting, I think, is how we've seen the leadership in the responsible AI space change over the last 12 months. So previously, this was very much the domain of the CDO or the chief analytics officer, but we've seen a swing to compliance and legal being now at least 50% of the audience, also the CISO becoming much more involved, and corporate affairs starting to get involved as we see regulation and guidance and so forth looming much more rapidly on the horizon. And finally, Daniel asked me to give a few examples of where we're already seeing companies actually piloting uses of generative AI. I think the biggest area is in customer service, where it can be used to support agents, helping them to understand emails or calls and provide the best possible answers phrased in the best possible way. Very powerful in terms of research and summarizing. So in the legal sector, for example, scanning through historical cases, summarizing, and then drafting initial versions of documents. The advertising industry is starting to use it for creative purposes. I talked to one advertising firm that said they had done an experiment and reduced the time it took to develop a new pitch with a logo and copy and slogans and so on from 1 to 2 weeks to half a day of the right team in the room, but working together with the assistance of generative AI. And then perhaps one final example, medical note-taking. Thinking of doctors doing their rounds and either dictating or scribbling notes and then using the tool to help summarize those and draw out the action items. Obviously, doctor needs to check that they're correct, but a lot of time could be saved in that.